Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the most kid-friendly NFL podcast out there, to say the very least, and also a podcast where I can promise you none of us will ever choke our other co-hosts the way Draymond Green did so to Rudy Gobert, because, well, we like each other way more than that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, the fastest rising NFL podcast out there that is above 80-plus episodes. Mainly because, we don't really have too much else to do on our Saturday, so we've just decided for the 80-plus weeks, let's talk some football. But in all seriousness, welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, this week we're a little bit shorthanded, so we're running a power play against, and we're on the defense against the power play that is NFL talk this week. Because unfortunately, our games master Justin is out for the week. Justin ain't feeling super well, so Justin, we wish you the best of help. Help with your health, my friend, and hope you get better really soon. But we do have a third special guest sort of in the screen as the Podfather is resting his little one, trying to get her to burp as he finished feeding her pre-show. Podfather, how are we doing with that little bundle of joy?
You did mention this is the most kid-friendly podcast on the air, and that's also because Justin, who is the filthiest mouth of the three of us, is not here today. Get better soon, Justin. But yeah, let me tell you something. This is going to be the weirdest show for me because I'm going to be talking football while holding a baby like a football sometimes. So, yeah, we're good otherwise. As good as we can be, I guess. We're doing okay.
Rick, I have to ask, did the wife gave you permission on the idea that your child will be on video the entire time? Well, sort of.
She did.
She's at the,
well, we discussed, timing of everything, and I, obviously her schedule kind of rules all. So she said she can, you can hold her while you're on the podcast. That's fine too. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing here. We're being held and we're doing a podcast. And if she doesn't like any of my picks, so that's too bad. I've locked them in already, so it's too bad for that.
Indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a dad bod god, Podfather Rick is holding his little one right there. Welcome to another week of football talk. And as Rick just mentioned there, with Justin being out, and with him being out, and Rick now, clearly busy 24/7 of what his life is. We made the picks early this week due to insinuating circumstances, this one being included. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will do us all the favor, Rick, and I will read off the selections made by Rick. Yeah, Rick, Justin, and I earlier today, ladies and gentlemen, for the Sports Agents of Chaos, hashtag SAOC, a pick, a challenge. In regards to the big challenge, we normally do this at the end of the show, so I'm not doing this. I'm used to doing this so early, but let me do this real quick, ladies and gentlemen. Rick, Justin, and I pick all the games in the week of an NFL slate on a 4-to-1 point scale based off of our confidence level of the games that are available that week. 4, of course, being the most confident. 1 is your least confident pick. Although, there's some confidence if you're picking a team to win. We all must have at least one upset pick. However, the lowest it can be is our 2-point pick. We can go for a tie, but it must be used with your 4-pointer, which gets upgraded to a 5. And all of the lines are given to us by our friends at Caesar Sportsbook. Dang.
Actually, no, not anymore. Remember, we talked about this last week, I believe?
That is. I'm just so used to the continuity.
I want to be the one that breaks because Justin's not here. All of our lines are brought to us by ESPN Bet.
There we go. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, maybe they'll sponsor us. It would be smart for several reasons. But yes. In all actuality, so ESPN is now giving us the lines for these games. So last week. Well, sort of last week because the app only launched earlier this week. So realistically, sure. This would technically be the first week of it. So happy first week with the ESPN betting lines now, Rick.
Yay!
Ironically, that Justin couldn't be here for that.
I know, right? It's the worst.
And also, by the title of the show, I know I kind of skipped this in the intro, ladies and gentlemen. We're chaotic in every way, shape, or form here. This episode will include us talking about the hot seat. It is the head coach hot seat-o-meter for the 2023 head coaches. A lot of coaches potentially on the hot seat here in this 2023 campaign. And we have our thoughts on, will this be the last season they're leading their team? Will they be fired before the end of the season? Maybe. If only Justin were here, he would be able to, call his shot in the next firing like he did so amazingly with Matt Rule all those many moons ago. But we'll be getting into that later on in the show. We'll also have a brief bit of discussion because I don't know if you people have heard, but a certain quarterback is no longer playing this season. And yeah, that'll be the bulk of the show, ladies and gentlemen. We're ending things off in a very interesting way. Rick will blow all of our minds with a nice mind-blowing fact of the week. But for now, let me just recap to the people the pick challenge. So with our selections, and we don't have a full point standing, ladies and gentlemen. I can't give you all the details, but Rick is still in first place. Justin in second place. I'm in third place, but I'm feeling good about this week. I was feeling really good about my picks this week. So let's us continue. So my 4-point pick personally for this week was the Dallas Cowboys, who are taking on the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Pretty confident for the most part in regards to that game. Justin's 4-point pick was the San Francisco 49ers, who had a massive bounce back week last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the Trent Baalke Bowl. So, per winning, the contract stipulates that Trent Baalke must remain in regards. Trent Baalke must remain in the Jaguars organization. San Fran doesn't have to worry about him ever again. So, there's that.
No, and that's one of those games that we were all surprised by, I think, that how vicious of a beatdown it was. So good on the Niners for proving me wrong, and because I lost a point in that one. So yay.
Yeah, and honestly, because Rick, you and Justin have your office pools and other things, and you do all your preseason picks. Like I have my other podcast. I picked San Francisco in that one. I didn't think it would be that much of a drubbing, but It just goes to show that look what happens when you're actually healthy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Rick, for yourself, you can extrapolate on your picks directly here in regards. So let's go with your first back-to-back set of picks here. You have the Dolphins at 4 and the Lions at 3. Two other teams that were very heavily favored in their matchups. You can't go wrong with those selections.
No, I think the Dolphins have a pretty good matchup against the Raiders. I mean, look, Antonio Pierce has been a really good revelation for them as the head coach this year, but at some point he's going to come up against a really good offense. I mean, he got lucky because the first 2 weeks he faced the Giants and the Jets, who were both anemic offenses. The Dolphins, on the other hand, are not that. I mean, they've got a lot of weapons to their disposal, so I think they'll be able to kind of outgun Aiden O'Connell and that Raiders offense, if you will. And then in a 3-point game, NFC North matchups, the same thing applies for me when I talk about AFC West, when I talked about Justin with the Broncos and the Chiefs, and that, I didn't pick that game a while back because AFC West matchups scare me. NFC North matchups scare me too, but I think the Lions are just so far ahead of where the Bears are. I know Justin Fields is back, but it's his first week back, so it's first week back to real solid competition. And you look at the other side, you see Aiden Hutchinson there, ain't going to be pretty. So I think the Lions are a solid 3-point pick here. Look, as a Bears fan, I hate to see it, but listen, the more that our team loses, guys, the more likely our coach, who is on this hot seat-o-meter, make it closer to some spicy things happening to him.
So as Rick hopes for that was his 3-point selection on the week, and a pretty good 1-2 punch. And Rick, you've been talking about the whole time that hey, I'm in first place, and making jokes with it. But this could be a big 1-2 punch here at your 4 and 3-point picks to help you, try to get above Justin in this regard and stay above him.
Yeah, I mean, I say it all the time. It's the truth. Like I don't say that for the fun of the podcast. Like I don't normally finish in first place in a lot of things, So I mean, obviously, for me, being in first place for as long as I have for as many weeks, it's like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. And thankfully, Josh Allen and the Bills dropped their other shoe, so I stayed in first place this week by 1 point because the Broncos helped me out there, which is a scary thing to say, because considering the Broncos actually won the week that you ate a danger witch. So God help us all.
Hindsight 2020, I probably should have picked the Broncos for one of my.
Probably would have been good. Yeah, probably would have been good to do that, but it's it's neither here nor there.
So. I will admit, they did cross my mind for a second, like a very brief second on my 1-pointer, but I'm like, Justin, because Justin swiped it from me beforehand, so I'm like, okay, well, I can't really do it.
Yeah, no, that's again, I couldn't have done that because I picked the Bills anyways, so I would have lost that one regardless. So,
So let us continue. So that was that for Justin's 3-point pick. He picked the Jacksonville Jaguars. They need a bounce back week, Rick. They're hoping to do that against Tennessee. I think the one thing between you and I think we can agree with is that just the one thing that kind of frightens us is that Derrick Henry is liable to go off for some point. And could this be the game where he does go off and maybe get Jacksonville on a bit of a skid? We don't know.
So the one thing that I'm worried about with Tennessee is that Ryan Tannehill's the backup. That scares me. But you're right. Derrick Henry's liable. And Ty Spears is also a very good change of pace back too. So, and you know what? Will Levis, I think, knows how to use DeAndre Hopkins pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What a revelation. A quarterback who can actually throw to a top receiver. It's like guys who are young that are in this league can just do that because the older guys refuse to. Like, Garoppolo refused to throw to Devontae Adams in Las Vegas, and now Aiden O'Connell is like loving throwing to Devontae Adams. It's like Madden all over again.
Indeed it is. So there's that. For myself personally, I went with the Commanders with my 3-point pick. It's still Tommy DeVito starting. And look, all respect in the world to the man. He's living the American dream right now, still living at home with his parents, making decent NFL money. And he gets dinner on his table at the end of the day from his mom. Shout out to all the moms out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have that. And
you gotta wonder though if they keep not doing as well, if he doesn't win any games, how is the dinner gonna get progressively worse? Like week 18, if he doesn't come home with a win, is it gonna be like a kid cuisine like microwave meal instead of like a 3-course Italian dinner?
no. He just gets like self microwave ramen. Like he has to do it.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Back in college all over again.
Oh my god, that would be funny. But there's that, and then with my 2-point upset, I went with the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is big right now. The San Francisco 49ers, they still need to continue their rebound of their season. The Dallas Cowboys are coming off a big win. If you're Seattle and you want to keep pace and just the potential to be in tow with the 49ers later in the season, and also with Dallas, because remember, there's a big 3-week stretch coming up for Seattle where it's going to be San Fran, Dallas, and San Fran again. Those are 3 massive weeks that the Seahawks have that I think will ultimately be the decider on who's going to be the NFC West winner and who between Dallas and Seattle is going to be the top wildcard team. And it's a big 3-game stretch. So that means they have to get the wins when they can. This is a game that they got to win against the Rams.
I also think this is the one upset this week that is the strangest upset, because I know it's Rams by 1, and I get that Matt Stafford is back and able to play, but again, we're talking about the Seahawks here and talking about Witherspoon and Woolen, who have been 2 top shutdown corners going up against, I get very good receivers, but again, this is Stafford's first game back against the Seattle defense. So how they're a 1-point favorite, I don't know. So this is probably where it benefits you, because it's an upset and it works out in your favor.
Absolutely. And also I think Stafford coming back from an injury that was like, I think it was his thumb, if I'm not mistaken. It was so there's that. And then you have a Seahawks secondary that is a lot healthier than it was at the start of the season. We forget Tariq Woolen was a bit banged up at this beginning of the year, as was a lot of Seattle. And I think that was a underrating factor as to something we didn't think about going into that first game where, as we know, ultimately the Rams shockingly upset them. I think it's going to be a different story this time around in that regard.
Right.
So Seahawks there are my 2. Justin picked the Eagles at his 2-point upset because the Chiefs are favored in that one, which was a big save for you, Rick.
Oh my God. I did not have I only had one other upset for my preseason picks going into this week. And I think actually this was the one game that I picked them to win. So the fact they have 2 wins on the season so far is, a surprise in itself. But my 2-point was the Cardinals over the Texans. I mean, the Texans have been a story, but the offense looked a lot better for Arizona with Kyler Murray there. I know that he didn't have a touchdown pass, but it looked a lot better with him running things around. No knock on Josh Dobbs, but Kyler Murray does make that engine go. So having the Cardinals as a upset pick is trendy because the Texans are still prone to being young and overlooking games. So I think this could be a game they overlook. So I have Arizona at 2, and then I had the Chargers at 1, which I think you said it in our text chain, and it's true. What an indictment that the Chargers are playing a woeful Packers team, and none of us want to take it at anything higher than a 1-point pick. Yep. Because that's just how the Chargers are. They are just not consistent and not safe at all. Like they may be, I'm going to go out on a limb, they may be the most overrated team in the NFL based upon the fact that they have so much talent on their roster, and yet they can never seem to get over the hump, and they can never seem to stop beating themselves when it comes to winning or losing these games.
Indeed. And I said that exactly, where you're facing the Packers. Jordan Love, let's be real here. He's not good.
No, he's not.
He's not been good this season in any way. The Packers defense itself has also struggled, and we've seen later in games as, they have to constantly be out there. You can break the Packers defense on possessions with just a big play or two, which in theory the Chargers should be able to do, but we just don't have that confidence from an overall standpoint because, Rick, who knows, maybe this is the game where Jordan Love is due to finally look good again because the Chargers defense has surrendered a lot of yards this season. In these games.
That's the one thing too that I worry about, is that the Chargers defense is just so bad. And, like I said, this could be a big game for Jordan Love, but again, Justin Herbert, you expect something from him. So hopefully it works out in my hair. But again, with these games, with 1-pointers, I think they're throwaways. They're coin flips for me because, it could be anything at this point. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of coin flips, that's what Justin decided to do with his 1-point selection when he went Browns Steelers. Very interesting. Browns over the Steelers. I almost said Browns and Steelers, but no, he went with the Browns over the Steelers in that one. It's going to be very interesting. As we know, Deshaun Watson is going to be out for the remainder of the season. Not the only quarterback who's going to be out for the remainder of the season. We'll actually be talking about another guy here in a little bit of time that's going to be out for a significant stretch. Well, yeah, basically till the end of 2023. But yeah, Watson's going to be out. I believe it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson that's going to be getting the start, which bold move. And again, this is a pro DTR podcast. We do like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I actually do think he'd be a solid backup here just with his electric playmaking. I like the idea of we're starting to have backup quarterbacks with the DTR skill set as he does. But in that same effort, you have a guy who I think he started 1 or 2 games early on in the season, struggled a little bit, got a little bit banged up, right? I think one of his starts, he was sacked like 4 or 5 times, so that was just rough for the kid. And now you're putting him out there against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. That's pretty good. I mean, he has the wheels to potentially extend a play or two, but it's going to be tough here. And the Browns just like, I know Deshaun Watson's not good. This is not me saying that Deshaun Watson would make a world of a difference, but I mean, he did look a lot better in the second half last week. And I think against Baltimore, which ultimately, it was probably the best half of football he's played since he's gotten to Cleveland. And you have a combination of that. And also, again, like this is an all right skill position group, right? They're still trying to fully find their way. Like the rushing attack goes here and there in regards to not having Nick Chubb in the lineup for the remainder of the season, who they lost, funny enough, of course, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So maybe full circle moment here. I think this is a big opportunity for both of these AFC North teams to make ground in the standings. And Justin's riding with the Browns in this one.
Well, so that's where I think you have to also look at the flip side of the ball. The reason why the Browns are favored in this game is because of how good their defense has been this season. Going up against Kenny Pickett's Matt Canada's offense, if you will. But you're right. I mean, the Browns, if they lean heavily on Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, and then DTR can find Cooper in some space, they could make some noise. It's interesting because if you really think about it, this game, whoever wins this game is in the driver's seat for a wild card spot, because look at the rest of the standings, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the coach, but look at the rest of the standings. Look at how far Cleveland and Pittsburgh are ahead of these other wild card teams that are there. And, Baltimore is clearly far and away the best team in the AFC North, I think, but these two teams are gunning for that number 2 spot, and that is something because, again, as you mentioned, this is an AFC North game, so this is a big rivalry. This is a big I for both sides, and so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and like you said, the wild card picture, which I think has drastically turned with the injury I'll just say it now, just save us time, Joe Burrow, and basically ending the season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Sorry, Jake Browning, don't really have high expectations for you. That kind of breathes in a little bit of light to these teams that, were kind of on the fringe, and maybe it's like their seasons took a tough hit last week. I think specifically the Chargers. And now this Joe Burrow injury, that's one less team that you're going to have to worry about for the remainder of the season in terms of probability of going into games and getting a victory, right? Like we can say this very simply. When Joe Burrow was in that game, it was still a close game before his injury. And the week before, despite no Jamar Chase and no T. Higgins, they still nearly pulled it off against the Houston Texans. So
right.
We know what Joe Burrow means to that team, to that organization as a whole. They made their first Super Bowl appearance in however long, with him being the guy there when he was fully healthy. So, this is going to be a big deal for, the entirety of the AFC wildcard picture. These teams that maybe thought, before this past Thursday night, it's looking rough. This is new life because this is a team that you thought they're going to hit their stride here. They're going to rip off that 3-4-5 game winning streak. It kind of just deletes them from that potential now.
Well, that also kind of lends in, because we'll talk about Joe Burrow in a little bit too, but also lends into your 1-point pick, which
exactly,
because again, another team that what a year they've had in terms of like underachieving and struggling and everything. The Bills, you have the Bills over the Jets at 1 point, which is funny because week 1 Jets beat the Bills on a walk-off punt return touchdown, but that was probably all galvanized by the fact that we have to win for Aaron Rodgers because he's out. But Josh Allen hasn't looked good. The Bills fired their offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. So, again, I get the Bills' defense is going up against Jets' offense that isn't very good in their home, but Buffalo being 5-5 is not something you'd expect to see from a team that I think a lot of us said is probably still one of the kings of the AFC at this point. But right now, they're not looking like it at all.
And remember, Rick, I said before the season, I felt this was a critical year for Buffalo to finally get it together, because you look at the landscape of the AFC and things can switch on a dime. How little did we, and even me, I think I was the most critical of the three of us when it came to the Bills going into the season, that I just felt there was something missing with the Bills. And I didn't think that something missing would lead to them starting 5-5. I didn't think
Yet,
it would
yet,
be
yet,
that.
if I recall, I think you still picked the Bills to win the AFC East.
Oh no, yes, but I mean, I didn't do it comfortably.
That's fair. I don't think Justin and I think picked the Jets. I think Justin more comfortably than I did. I kind of just resigned to my fate, and then when Aaron Rodgers got hurt in Week 1, I was like, well, there goes my pick. So
Yeah, I mean, hey Rick, you never know. He could come back here in the next couple of weeks, because it wasn't the Achilles. But in all actuality, that's an interesting division. But in all seriousness, yes, the Bills are my 1-point pick because you gotta think with them heading into one of, if not the toughest stretches to end off the season here. Let me pull up the schedule right now, Rick, just to give context as to why. Like, I hate calling regular season games a must win because I feel that's very much a media induced, like, weekly hype up thing, right?
Yeah,
and I think we throw out that term way too much. But after this Jets game, let me just give you the schedule for the Bills. After this Jets game, they're on the road in Philly against the Eagles. Then they finally have their bye week, which I think earlier in the season, I think we talked about it may have been one of Justin's would you rathers between early or later bye, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is a Bills team that could have used this bye week a lot earlier than what they're getting at this point.
So I think the reason we were talking about was because Seattle had their bye week in Week 4.
Yes.
So yeah, you're right. It's either which one would you want, the earlier buy or the later buy. So
yes.
I think you're right. For the Bills to get that buy later this season, for the way that they've been playing it, it's sorely needed. But what's out of their buy?
Rick, I'm so glad you asked because they will be in Arrowhead Stadium against the Kansas City Chiefs. Why that game is at 4:25 p.m. and not Sunday or Monday Night Football, I can't even explain it. TV contracts, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
He's going to Twitter right now to tweet about that.
I mean, maybe, but I also want to see what game is on Sunday night, Monday night that week, just to kind of really drive the point home. So go ahead, continue.
Thank you. After that, the Bills will return home and they take on the Dallas Cowboys, who, I mean, say what you want to. They're up 500 right now and second in their division. After the home game against the Cowboys, they hit the road one more time against the Chargers in Los Angeles. So, you go from East Coast to West Coast. Then you go back home to take the Patriots against the Patriots at home, which that needs to be a revenge game. And then finally here, Rick, I know you're chomping at the bit to tell me what these primetime games are that week. And then it's Bills Dolphins in Miami after the new year.
Oh yeah.
And here's my thing, Rick. It's not even just the fact, because I didn't realize this. I don't know if we necessarily hit on this when we were talking the AFC East in the preseason. To me, the biggest thing here is that there is no consistency for Buffalo aside from like after the Eagles and Chiefs back to back. They're going back and forth for the rest of the season in terms of home and away. And it's not even the easiest because they have to go from Buffalo to Los Angeles here. Like that's rough if you're the Bills.
It's a brutal stretch for them. But again, when you're the number one team in your division, you're gonna face number one teams outside of your normal opponents. So you got to bite that bullet there. So to answer the question, you have a gripe about Monday night, but not about Sunday night. Sunday night is Eagles Cowboys.
That's fair.
Monday night, there's two games Monday night, because I think we get back to the whole two games of that. Mm-hmm. You have an absolute gripe here. Packers Giants.
Oh Lord.
And Titans Dolphins.
Oh Lord.
So the Dolphins, I would keep that game because again, Derrick Henry's a primetime candidate. The Dolphins offense is a primetime candidate. But Packers Giants, flip that. I know you can't, but flip that. Put that on Sunday afternoon and give us Bills Chiefs Monday Night Football. That would be the ideal scenario.
Rick, you could put Packers Giants in a arena running an AEW show for all I care. I mean, it'll actually catch a greater attendance than any AEW show has over the last like half year. So
did you see? I don't know if you saw this. Did you see that the University of Wyoming hosts their wrestling events in like a barn?
Yeah.
Like I watched they were facing Campbell, which honestly, the Cowboys versus the Fighting Camels, sign me up for that any day of the week. But put the Giants and Packers in a barn. You could do much better than that,
Yeah. It would hopefully be cheaper too. We would assume.
Well, yeah.
Depends on the location.
I don't know what the conversion rate is between hay and cow feed to American dollars. So when I figure that out, I'll let you know. Give me some sickles and canutes, and then we'll talk.
I figured it would be like sticks of butters and apples and stuff like that.
Well, that's fair. Reasonable. Yeah.
But ultimately, those were our picks for the pick challenge this week. A little bit out of order, ladies and gentlemen.
Not to mention, too, yes. We feel bad because, for one thing, obviously the Pirate hasn't been on the podcast in a while because the pirate works with me, and obviously, things are a little busy over here in the Podfather household.
Well, also he got sick. He got a little bit of case of scurvy. So
he did. The Den of Chaos has been, rife with scurvy and new children and other ailments.
Dogs that sleep.
Dogs that sleep and light fixtures that turn on whenever they want to. But regardless, so we felt bad. So we gave the pirate the wheel spin of just favor. So we gave him the 10x plus 1 for 11 points. And the pick for him is the Vikings over the Broncos, which I think is a pretty good pick because, again, look at what Josh Dobbs has been doing this season. In Arizona, he did what he needed to do. He kind of held the ship firm until Kyler got back. And then in Minnesota, he's won 2 games in a row with very, very solid performances all around. And I think, too, the Broncos getting the win last week sets them up for a letdown week this week. So it's not a bad pick by him.
Right. I do want to say this, Rick, because this thought crossed my mind earlier this week when I was talking to some friends, right? And I want to, this could be just like a simple answer now. I think we should revisit this conversation as we get towards the end of the season. We knew Kirk Cousins was on a contract year, right, going into this. And for all indications, for whatever reason, and I know I harp on Kirk Cousins a lot, but it seemed like the Vikings weren't necessarily keen on keeping him past 2023, right? They were more than content with him hitting the market. Then the Vikings start to win a little bit. And before they could hit their stride, he gets injured. He's done for the year. And now it's Josh Dobbs that has come in, taking control, the surprise win against Atlanta, and now beating New Orleans. Now, granted, yes, NFC South teams, but again, 2 wins, helping the season stay afloat, helping them in the wild card hunt and even stay in the division race. For all of the who's going to be the Vikings quarterback, because I have a friend, he hasn't been on the show before, Rick, but I think you've probably seen him like once or twice on other shows I've done. My guy, Stu, right?
Yes.
Stu is always one to ask the question, like, okay, it's cool if you want to get rid of, insert name of solid quarterback here, like Kirk Cousins, but who are you going to replace him with that could give you that production, right?
Yep.
Do you think the Vikings at this moment, and again, we'll re-ask this at the end of the season when all is said and done, do you think the Vikings are content at this moment to think, hey, we could just roll with Josh Dobbs?
So I'll say my answer in one sentence because I think it's probably a good enough choice here. I will say yes, and my reasoning is they did it with Case Keenum.
Yeah.
They got to an NC title game with Houston's best quarterback, not named Andre Ware. So why not? They might be a system that it doesn't really matter who their quarterback is because they have a good enough offensive talent core with Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, the Sins, if you will, and Madison. Actually, there's four Sins. So they have a good enough offensive core; they can make it work. The defense has to get better, but they're solid enough on offense, I think, to really contend. And Dobbs seems to be a veteran who knows not to turn over the ball, not to get too aggressive when it doesn't call for it. So I think so. I think they're content with it.
Do you think so? We have Addison, Jefferson, Matheson, and Hawkinson.
Yep.
We need 3 more players, and we can have the 7 deadly sins of skill position talent.
We need to find them.
Van Jefferson?
Yeah, but there's already a Jefferson on the team. You got to be unique.
Yeah, we can always repeat. Come on, it's a copycat league, if we're being honest here.
Well, if Trent Richardson was still in the league, that would be 5.
Oh, get him out of retirement.
Yep, exactly. Or trade for Anthony Richardson.
I think that'll be a little bit harder.
A little difficult, but
I think that'll be a little bit difficult to say.
Difficult, yeah.
All right. Well, as we will Google over the next coming weeks of what other players we could add that ends in the name of Sun, let's get to the crux of the show before the head coach hot seat opener.
Anders Carlson, the kicker.
Yep.
There you go.
Let's go. What about Gabriel Carlson?
Yeah, sure. Could get him too.
I mean, if we're being real here, the Raiders are stupid. They'll probably let him go at some point.
Exactly.
There we go. So, that being said, let's talk about the main thing. We already talked about Deshaun Watson being out a little bit and, what that could potentially do and how it's going to impact a game. Let's talk about a game that was already played that saw a lot of injuries, Rick. And let's give also credence. The main headline is, of course, Joe Burrow, but let's also give credence. Mark Andrews is also going to be out for the remainder of 2023. That in and of itself is a massive blow to the Baltimore Ravens offense for a team that has already been very much up and down throughout this season. In games where they look great, they will demolish the Seattle Seahawks. They will able to clutch up a victory against the Cincinnati Bengals in a primetime game. We have to call Thursday night primetime by contract, but in reality, it's not really prime. Nor do we like the time. So, nor do the players actually like this time. So there it is. But Andrews is a big injury for a team that, while they've had the highest of highs this season, they've also had the lowest of lows, which most recently was last week. And I wish we didn't have this game on Thursday night so we could have actually ripped the Ravens a little bit here as we were going into it, because, good Lord, that was an awful, just choke job of a game that they had against the Cleveland Browns, scoring some people over on their point picks. But my feelings regardless. Well, keep your hand on screen. But yes, absolutely. They screwed me over last week. And what I thought was actually a pretty good week of picks, honestly, for myself. And but in all seriousness, rough loss for the Ravens, as now Lamar Jackson's number one guy is out. I think OBJ also got injured, if I'm not mistaken. At least he got banged up. Yeah, and Lamar got hurt, I saw, but yeah. I haven't seen any indication that it's going to be a long-term thing. So
no, but that's the more significant of the injuries if it does turn into something, because I mean, again, you can replace OBJ with Rashad Bateman or Devin Duvernay or even Zay Flowers, who's been a really good rookie for them, and they have a replacement for Mark Andrews. I mean, they were using Isaiah Likely a ton in that game after the fact, so they've got a good replacement for him there. But Lamar Jackson, you don't have a replacement for that. I don't care what you say about Tyler Huntley, or it was even Josh Johnson was getting reps on the sideline before Lamar was good to come back in. Those guys are not Lamar Jackson. And, for a Ravens team that, again, it seems like every time something good happens to them, the injury bug bites them. So, just got to try and avoid that and make sure that Lamar's okay to really have a shot at being competitive, because I at this point, I see them as the only real threat to the Chiefs right now in the AFC.
Yeah, absolutely, especially record-wise and trying to take away home field advantage from them on the AFC side. But so that's in regards to the Ravens, although, like you said, Lamar's the biggest thing, despite the terrible fourth quarter he had against the Browns. He is that Ravens engine. He is the way the team goes, and him being healthy is the most important thing in the world. But we know we can confirm one thing. There is another QB done, and he is in the AFC North. Joe Burrow, done for the season. It was torn ligaments in his wrist, if I'm not mistaken. That's ultimately going to spell the end of his 2023 campaign. That started with him on the injury report. Remember, he had the calf strain at the beginning of the year that he, between him and the team, chose to play through. Really, hindsight 2020, probably should have given him an extra week or two to sit out, especially with how the performances were going. He comes back in. It's a little bit slow to start. Well, no, he comes in slow to start literally through the first 4 weeks, and we're just waiting like, dang, when is this Ravens team finally going to be able to Bengals team finally going to get it? They get their first win of the season against the Rams. They drop a bad game against the Tennessee Titans, and then they rip off a couple wins here in a row, looking pretty good, honestly, taking advantage of other teams, beating the Bills, beating the 49ers. Like, they were looking good. They got victories in this, and now the big thing is that it's all gone. I'll just say it straight up. I'll give the opinion first, man. Like, look, Joe Burrow, for as slow as the start may have been, as rough as some things looked, he is that franchise. He's the guy. They paid him the contract, and even without paying him the contract, we've seen what he can do for this team. Back-to-back seasons where they made it at least to the AFC title game, winning even the AFC title game a couple years ago. And in a season where there was a lot of change for the Bengals, and they had some growing pains, and it looked like here and there, they were able to overcome some of these things. You can't overcome losing your franchise quarterback. You just can't. And this ultimately spells the end for the season. I think now if you're Cincinnati, the one thing you just got to look towards is trying to kind of rebuild this team back up from the losses that you experienced last offseason, what you're going to experience this offseason. Jonah Williams, who's been solid on that offensive line for his the first 5 years of his career. We know he's going to be a free agent because he was upset with the signing of Orlando Brown Jr. and being moved from left tackle. We know he wants to be a left tackle in this game, and he's signing to another team for sure in the offseason. We know T. Higgins is a free agent, and who's going to pay him potentially. Kind of a down year this season for him compared to the last two, but I still think T. Higgins, someone's going to pay a pretty penny to get a guy like that with that kind of talent, that kind of skill set, and it's a big investment for the Bengals to think if they can even keep him, because Jamar Chase's contract is on the horizon. So you got that as well. And that defense needs to be rebuilt. I think the front seven has been fine, right? But you have a guy in Trey Hendrickson who you paid big money to a couple seasons ago. He's been good. Do you need to rework his contract at some point? Because I think it was just a 4-year deal. So he has 1 year left after this. Who else on that front four is staying? Your linebacking core, I think, is set. I think they kept the guys that they wanted to keep, so there's that. But then you have a secondary, which they just lost so many pieces in the offseason, and they've really had to rely on a lot of bigger young guys to try to step up here. And, it's been up and down for every good play by Daxton Hill. You have Cam Taylor-Britt, who was targeted, I think, like 2 or 3 times in that final drive by C.J. Stroud last week. So, yeah. Ultimately, it's been an up and down season for Cincy that I think this could be a blessing in disguise, potentially, Rick, if the Bengals are able to rebuild some of these pieces going into 2024. Because you have an offense that has a couple question marks, and now you have this defense that, for all intents and purposes, they're not great. They're fine, but they're not great.
No, and if you look at the Bengals' remaining schedule, none of the teams they play have records below 500. So they're, I think the last time they played a team that was sub 500 was October 8th when they beat the Cardinals. Because if you look at the run after that, the Seahawks over 500, the Niners over 500, the Bills 500, the Texans 500, Ravens obviously, then Steelers, Jaguars, Colts are 500, Vikings, Steelers, Chiefs, and Browns. So it's going to be tough. So the thing about it is you have to make a decision if you're Cincinnati. And the thing that I would kind of lean towards is, if you're the Bengals, do you want to try and get a veteran quarterback to try and help lead them? Because they still do have a shot. I know FPI said 10% shot at the playoffs with the Burrow injury, but you still do have a shot at the playoffs. So do you want to try and get a veteran signal caller in, like a Trevor Siemian from the Jets practice squad, or a Joe Flacco, or any other of these other veterans that are on the free agency list? Obviously, you can't get Carson Wentz, but somebody else you can get, because you have to either decide, are we going to continue trying for the playoffs with the roster that we have with Mixon, Chase, Higgins, Boyd, all these other great players that they have, or do you want to take the chance and see what you have in Jake Browning? And, know that you're probably not going to win another game the rest of the season. And if you do, you're playing spoiler. So this is the franchise-altering and season-altering point that the Bengals are at now. It's either, do you want to play spoiler or try and go for the playoffs? So I think if there's Cincinnati, if you want to go for the playoffs, you pick up somebody, some veteran somewhere. Maybe, the problem is you can't trade because the deadline passed. So you have to go to free agency or hope somebody's on waivers. So you pick up somebody who knows how to run a system, because you have a decent amount of time before your next game. Or do you trust Jake Browning, who wasn't a bad college quarterback, but I don't know. I'd rather bring in somebody who knows how to throw the ball a little bit better against offenses and can get the ball to Jamar Chase a lot more regularly than a young kid like Browning can. So it's the worst case scenario for the Bengals, because if this happened prior to the deadline, they could sell off their assets and, make off like bandits and go for the number 1 overall pick. But because they haven't had that fortune, it's difficult to say, where they're going to be. But right now they are in last place in their division. And that's not something that you expect to see from a team who was in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. It's very, very surprising to see. But again, the injury bug has just befell Joe Burrow, and that's kind of what hurts the most, I think, in this regard.
I think someone trolled me there with the mic muting.
It was my daughter. My daughter did it.
Yeah. But blame the kid.
Yep.
But ultimately, a season, and like you mentioned, disappointment, because not even just 2 years ago, last year being in the AFC title game. And look, man, the momentum that they had, they beat the Seahawks, like you said, they beat the Niners, and they beat the Bills. Those are not bad teams in any way, shape, or form. Those are not bad teams that they had to beat to get back to this point where they were scratching and clawing to be in the wild card picture again. And, for all intents and purposes, when Burrow was healthy, they were in the Thursday night game. They were straight up, and it takes his injury to completely knock them the hell out of that contest. So ultimately, rough thing for Cincy. You just got to look forward to 2024. I think should be the mindset. Of course, the players are going to keep playing. I'm not saying that for this is a player perspective. I feel like whenever we come to these conversations, there's always something wrong. But this is not a players thing that I'm saying. This is, for me, ultimately, as Rick adorns my lovely face there, this is not ultimately a me thing, or a me thing when it comes to these conversations of, looking ahead and blowing up. I'm not talking about a player's perspective here. Obviously, the players, the coaches, they're playing for this season. They're playing to have good ends to the year. They're playing for good tape. They're playing for et cetera. When it comes to the organization as a whole, management, you got to look towards to 2024. How can you fix the various things when it comes to this roster that you need to adjust? Like I said, offensive line could still use a little bit of work. Skill position group, what is going to be the depth of this team afterwards? Is Joe Mixon still going to be a Bengal post 2023 going into the 2024 season? The tight end situation, where you had relatively solid play this season, it kind of ebbs and flows in that regard. So you got to re-strengthen the tight end room there. Again, the defense contracts that are going to be coming up in not even just this offseason, but in another year or two. The young defensive back crew, have they done this season? A lot of things that you need to plan for this offseason that I think, not saying you skip the remainder of the season, you don't care about it, because what the goal of the Bengals should be, this is now a pure evaluation period on who is going to still play a role for the team in 2024 in regards to a number of players on this squad. And, I think I may have mentioned this in a different situation last week, but, get those salary cap strategists working on this team, man, because you got to find any single way by hook or by crook to get T. Higgins and Jamar Chase still on this team. Because if you have the both of them, that offense looks great.
I'm confused. Were you in my computer earlier? Because I don't know where Taylor Swift went. Because you hacked into my system and you made yourself my avatar picture there. How did that feel, by the way, talking to yourself?
It was very unique, and I didn't hate it as much as I thought I normally would. So I guess that's a positive.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, we knew this was going to be a big offseason for the Bengals regardless because of the contracts they'd have to work and the magic they'd have to work. Well, now coming out of it, this could be a team that could also find themselves in like a high 12, 13 overall pick territory. And, where do you go? What's your avenue of expertise? Or do you try and trade into a team who's desperate for a top talent? That way you can try and get later picks and maybe some cash out of the deal so you can try and structure these deals a little bit more. I don't know if maybe that could be in the Bengals' future, but you're right. There's a lot of salary cap gymnastics that have to be done in 2024, unlike the real gymnastics being done in Paris in 2024. So.
Indeed. Great reference to the Olympics right there, Rick. But yeah, ultimately for the Bengals, this is a very much evaluate and see period now for this team. You might lose on, of course, the ultimate goal of missing out on the postseason, but you still can get the positive of figuring out what this team is going to look like as you try to, get ready for 2024 and really push for it. Because again, when you have a quarterback talent like Joe Burrow, it's a crime to not try to be competing when you have a guy like that being the man in Cincy. So that is the ultimate goal for 2024. If you're the Bengals, get this team ready, get them re-upped, and get them ready to go on a good and long run is the ultimate hope here. So, Podfather, let's move on to something that we are known for very much doing on the show and talking about: are these guys going to keep their jobs, Rick? Or are they going to lose them? Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the 2023 edition of your NFL head coach hot seat meter. Which, by the way, Rick, you're the better historian when it comes to this because you just have the amazing brain for it. Did Justin miss this episode last season too?
Justin did miss. You know what I think happened when we talked about this? I can't remember if it's the NFC North one last year or this one. Justin, I know, had a wedding that he had to get to. I think it was this episode. Yeah, that he missed because he had, I think, his brother's wedding. Because we made the joke we were sending Sandoval to the wedding in a box and putting it on the gift table as like a little joke to mess with him. But yeah, so he did miss this one. So at least some things are consistent. It works out.
I mean, we would have appreciated his presence as well. But ladies and gentlemen, of course. But ladies and gentlemen, it is the head coach hot seat meter. So basically what this is that we have a long list of head coaches, and it's actually pretty expensive, actually, in that regard. And we are going to be going through this list and rating these head coaches' situations on the hot seat on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being very lukewarm, ice cold, iced coffee, even not from Dunkin'. Very, very cool in that regard, and they're fine for 2024. As opposed to, as we get higher up into a 5 of, you're not keeping your job at the end of this year. You're just not. So, Rick, that being said, like I said, we have a very long and expansive list to go into in this regard. So let's start things off really quick. This is in no particular order. This is just the way that the names shaked out. So, if someone wants to come out and you can. I literally just went in the order it displayed in the conferences. So first head coach here, Mike Vrabel. Yes, of course, it's the Tennessee Titans head coach first. Rick, I'll throw this one to you first really quick. Mike Vrabel on the head coach hot seat meter. What is he?
So I think this one's an interesting one because I think he would be higher, but for a different reason. I'm going to tie it in with somebody who's not on our list, but I think could be somebody there. So I'm going to go with a 4 for Mike Vrabel. The Ryan Tannehill experiment hasn't worked anymore, and Derrick Henry hasn't been the same guy. He can still pop off a big game here or there, and the expectations there are pretty bad. But I think why I have this as a 4 is because I think Mike Vrabel is the most likely head coach of these ones, not to necessarily get fired, but to move on to another job. Because if you look what's happening in Boston with Bill Belichick and New England, if Belichick is the guy who's not going to stick around after this season, and that's a DEFCON 5 scenario, I think the Patriots want to bring somebody in who knows the Patriot way, and that's Mike Vrabel. So I feel like he would be a prime candidate to take that coaching position in New England. I think he hasn't done that bad of a job in Tennessee because, I mean, that division is, after last week, that division is still up in the air because Jacksonville is not holding on to it anymore like they used to. So I give them a 4 because it hasn't been. And look, they were a game away from winning the AFC South last year. You know, that last game of the year with, coincidentally, Josh Dobbs is their starting quarterback. So it's amazing how the circle goes around. But I think that in his case, his number is higher, buoyed by the fact that he's been in a lot of conversations to go to New England. And if he's not there, I still think that maybe they give him one more year. But I feel like the timing is right now to strike if you're the Patriots. If you're not holding on to Belichick, to strike for Vrabel now, to bring him in there, because he's not a bad coach. He's just, I think, in a bad situation in Tennessee. So I have him as a 4 in that regard.
I don't blame you. I'm with you. I have him as a 4 as well. I'm very hesitant. The only thing that slightly keeps it from a 5 is because I don't think Mike Vrabel is a guy that can necessarily lose the locker room, which I think would be one of the ways that a coach would certainly get fired. I don't think a Mike Vrabel would lose the locker room. But what I do think is that he's probably lost like the higher ups of that organization. Predominantly, they're the Titans GM, this is a new general manager, ladies and gentlemen. This is not the guy that brought Mike Vrabel in to be the head coach. This is not the guy who traded for Ryan Tannehill. This is not the guy who made these decisions, but this is going to be the guy that ultimately cuts ties, I think, with him. Like you said, Rick, I think this is a case where the Ryan Tannehill thing, it worked, parentheses unworked, for a very brief spell of time. You made it to an AFC championship game on a magical run out of nowhere. You get the number 1 seed the next season, but then everything falls apart when you lose in that first game, despite getting 9 sacks on the quarterback. That said quarterback, Joe Burrow. So you end up losing that game to the Cincinnati Bengals, and they make the Super Bowl that year. And you would have had, you had home field advantage throughout the entirety of that run, including Kansas City having to go to you. So what would have happened? I mean, to me, the Chiefs still would have won the game, but irregardless, there's what ifs, and it's almost like you mentioned, a time comes to pass. And I just think that time is ultimately over for Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. But, this could very much be a case where I think at most 1 season would be what he misses. And maybe not considering the amount of coaches we have on this list, Rick. There's a chance that 1 or 2 of these coaches could lose a job this offseason, but they might actually get hired like 2 to 3 weeks later.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of names that are on here, it's just about fit than it's about their overall performance. And I think you're going to see that if some of these names go out there, that they will quickly be scooped up very quickly.
Absolutely. But let's talk about a guy who, we don't think he'll be scooped up as a head coach, to say the very least. Brendan Staley is the guy on this. Is next on this list, Rick. Let me just say this straight up. It's a 5, and if they lose to the Packers, fire him immediately. There's no reason. I mentioned it before with Burrow. There's no reason why when you have a Justin Herbert as your quarterback, who, only 7 teams in this league would say no to Justin Herbert as their quarterback.
Right.
You got to do everything you can from an organizational level to win with that guy. Yeah. And simply put, they haven't done that. Only 1 playoff appearance, and we saw what happened in that 1 playoff appearance literally earlier this year. It was last season, but it was literally like 10 months ago. So if you are the Los Angeles Chargers, Tom Telesco, this is very interesting because it's almost like, how many bullets do you have? Like, do you somehow have 7 bullets in a 2-bullet chamber? Because GMs get a lot of guys here. I think this is Telesco's 3rd or 4th head coach, if I'm not mistaken, between his inevitable firing of Staley and if he keeps his job. And it's been very underwhelming in the Herbert era. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten a lot of these, acquisitions and draft picks in the offseason, right? But they've never been able to put it all together. And Staley's a 5 for me. Simple as that.
So I'm going to put it like this. I agree with you. The number is 5, but I'm going to put it like this. It doesn't matter what the Chargers do, how they finish their season. Staley and Telesco will be fired after this season. They could go to the AFC title game for all I care. It doesn't matter because the pattern of the past with Staley's coaching decisions and how horrific they've been, to the fact that, as you said, Telesco's gotten 4 chances now, basically, or something like that. You need to freshen things up. You need to revitalize that franchise. You have one of the top quarterbacks in the National Football League under your wing in Justin Herbert. You have, as much as we poo-poo the running backs, one of the best running backs in Austin Eckler. Look at their wide receiver core of Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston. This is an offense that is super high-powered. Their defense is very suspect. So I think that's where they should lean towards in the offseason and in the draft. But that is an indictment on Brandon Staley because, again, you're bringing in a guy like J.C. Jackson, and he's not doing it for you. So all of that you're wasting on what you could have gotten a young quarter in here to learn the system. I remember back when they had Quentin Jammer, was their quarterback way back when. He was phenomenal for them. Like you want someone in that bold, not a J.C. Jackson type. So, but yeah, there's been so many problems with Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco that I say 5. And again, I repeat, it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter if they make the playoffs this year, if they don't, if they go to the AFC title game, if they go to the Super Bowl even. If they win the Super Bowl, maybe, but it doesn't matter for me. They need to go. And from Los Angeles, they need to get fired after the season. Or as you said, if they lose to Green Bay this week, because it's my 1-point pick, immediately. I will fire them myself if they lose to Green Bay, because that's my 1-point pick.
You'll try to find a way to hack in and send them over the firing and make it look official.
I don't have a fax machine, so I'll find a pigeon, just type it to their leg, and just have them fly cross country. We'll see what happens there.
There we go. But yeah, and I think my last point about in regards to Staley, you're a defensive guy coming in. The defense is bad. You've had multiple chances with the offense now. Herbert makes that offense look really good. He makes it look really good, and it doesn't feel like they're always playing to his strengths, which I don't personally understand why you don't play to the strengths of your quarterback.
Right, so, I agree with that.
There's that. Yeah. All right, Rick, let me actually go to – so originally this was the last AFC coach on here, but I'm actually going to push him back real quick because you know what? Let's tie it together with the first name on this list. Rick, Bill Belichick.
Ooh, so this is going to sound really weird. I feel bad for the guy. As a New York sports fan and as an ex-Jets fan, I didn't think I'd feel as bad as I do for Bill Belichick because, I get it, but he's the de facto GM, so he's making all these picks. But, he's also the head coach who's dealing with the fact that Mac Jones has been a bust and that, they don't have a good wide receiver group. They just don't. I mean, Kendrick Bourne was really good, but he's out. So who else do they have? I think you reach a point with stagnancy, and I think Tom Coughlin knew it best. When he knew that the guys weren't connecting with him anymore, he knew to walk away. Of course, he left Ben McAdoo in charge, and it's been I think Justin would give the better word for it, but it's been terrible ever since. I think you know what Justin would probably say about that, but I think for Belichick, I put him at a 4.5 on my 1 to 5 list because, yes, I know the Crafts, they want to win all the time. It hasn't worked. If you want to keep him on as head coach, bring in a new GM. Take that away from him. But if you want to start clean, you start clean. But he will be a guy that I think will find a spot somewhere else, if not for nothing else, for nostalgia purposes. Because I don't think he still has some tricks up his sleeve, but he's not the Bill Belichick of 20 years ago when he plucked a 5th-round pick in Tom Brady or a 6th-round pick in Tom Brady and made him the greatest quarterback of all time. Right. He's not that guy anymore. So I think we're done with Belichick as a head coach, unless he finds a way to reinvent himself. I'll liken to this for only that particular reason, and not for nothing else physically. Look at Bartolo Colon. Bartolo Colon found a way to reinvent himself and was still pitching to 50. He wasn't throwing 95, 98 gas, but he was still finding ways to throw good pitches, consistent innings. That's what you need from Belichick. Find a way to reinvent yourself somehow. And maybe you'll find it on another team. But I don't see it in New England anymore. I don't.
Right. I have it, for me personally, at a 3, only because I'm wondering, does Robert Kraft still have the respect in Bill Belichick that his resume will keep him there as the head coach past this season? But I specify the head coach portion because at minimum, he should no longer be the general manager there. I think it's very clear that his decisions in terms of roster construction have been flawed and just are non-existent at this point. You mentioned wide receiver. Kendrick Bourne is nice. I love Kendrick Bourne. I want him as my number 3 receiver, not my number 1 or even my number 2. And who do you have there aside from him? Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster. That's nothing to ring the bell about.
And Pop Douglas, don't forget about him either. The 7th-round pick out of Liberty. Really? But all you need to do is go into my closet and go find the Cole Strange jersey. I remember that he was a 1st-round pick by Bill Belichick. What does that tell you?
What a decision that was, eh?
Oh man, that started basically this entire podcast in emotion, if you think about it.
That was the first highlight for this podcast.
It was.
You know what? We're gonna have a lot of fun here, aren't we?
We are. Yes. Yeah. But I agree with you. Like his general manager acumen isn't there. It's not. So you need to bring in somebody who knows how to be a GM.
Yeah. Well, not anymore, to say the very least. He just can't build it the same. And maybe like we mentioned, if you do get rid of him in both ways, this new GM, they might bring in the Mike Vrabel for all we know. That's a guy who I think would work up in New England, to say the very least.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's get to the original guy who was last on the list of just the AFC coaches, and saving him for last because, I mean, this could be, again, I hate cliches, but this might be a must-win one here. Not for him being fired this season, but how this season will end up for this team. Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills. Look, it is something. And the old classic, all right, how do I get the heat off me slightly? Fire the offensive coordinator or fire the coordinator, whichever unit is struggling the most, which clearly it is the offensive turnovers are to be just. Rick, with McDermott, to me, I think, it's simple. I got it at a 4, and I know it might seem high for a lot of people, but like there's an expectation to win. Just win. You had to win. And this is a Buffalo Bills team where it's like with the issues of Stephon Diggs coming into the season and the consistency of the fact that there's problems with the running back room. And again, I know at the end of the day, like this is not a situation where he's also the GM. We don't blame him in that regard, but how do you not find last week, Devin Singletary, 150 rushing yards. You know who he used to play for the first 4 years of his career? The Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that this unit has been struggling to get a rushing attack going in the Josh Allen era? That's not Josh Allen. One of the running backs that was your guy, he just put up 150 in a game.
Yeah.
Like, and with Dayball leaving, Dorsey, you had him for a bit. The offense looked fine at points, but now you throw him under the bus. Defense is supposed to be your thing. And I know the defense has been injured. Trust me when I say I understand the defense has been injured, but a discipline thing of, being put in a bad situation to get defensive pass interference at the end of a game, that's coaching.
Yeah.
12 men on the field, that's coaching. That's a leadership and an oversight deficiency. Like, you can't blame that. Like, Ken Dorsey's not the reason why there was 12 men on the field at the end of that game.
Yep.
And Ken Dorsey, like, for all we want to say, he's not the reason Josh Allen's fumbling the football either. That's Josh Allen trying to play Superman. And I feel like when it comes to QBs, Rick, we can talk about the QB and offensive coordinator relationship in terms of the play calling. I think the quarterback head coach relationship, I kind of liken this to and because I've gotten into the sport recently, Rick will find this funny. In F1, there's whoever the number one driver on your team is, and then there is your crew chief, like the main communicator, your crew chief, and giving them and kind of empowering them. How much is Sean McDermott empowering Josh Allen to just go out there and make these Superman plays? Because Josh Allen, it feels like he keeps trying to make these plays happen. As the head coach, you've got to be the one to try to talk the quarterback out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way Josh Allen plays, and I agree. It's not good for longevity. Going into last week, I had him as a 2, but following last week's debacle, I have him as a 3, but like a high 3, like a rising 3, because let's liken this to Brandon Staley for a second here. Both coaches have top-tier quarterbacks and have expectations. The difference between the two of them is that Buffalo has had the division titles and the title game appearances, whereas the Chargers haven't. Despite the fact that they play in the same division as Kansas City, you expect the Chargers to kind of get over that hump. Where Buffalo's been one of the classes of the AFC East and of the AFC in general. Now, the reason why I have it as a rising 3 is because if I have something to say about Jimmy Haslam and D. Haslam and the ownership in Cleveland, you know damn well I'm going to say something about the Buffalo ownership, the Pagulas. Yeah. Terry Pagula might be one of the more under-the-radar, mercurial, crazy owners I've ever seen that's not named Eugene Melnick, rest in peace, or not in peace, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But regardless, so I think, yeah, like these divisions have been winnable, and that's nice. But if you're Buffalo, you expect more. You expect at least a Super Bowl appearance, and it just hasn't happened. And you could say, well, Kansas City has gotten better than a bunch, or Cincinnati's gotten better than a bunch. But it's like, but eventually you have to win one of those games, right? That's what you said when you were making that pick about the Bills in this week's pick challenge. They have to win one of these games at some point, right? You have to win an AFC championship at some point. And let's see what happens with the new offense with the new coordinator, because I'll tell you what, I mean, I feel bad for Ken Dorsey because he wasn't the problem. You know, he was making bad decisions, but as you said, the 12 men on the field on defense has nothing to do with the offensive coordinator. Josh Allen being careless with the football has nothing to do with the offensive coordinator. That's Josh Allen in his moment, either running with the ball, not taking care of it, or throwing an ill-advised interception. So I feel bad when coordinators get fired if their offenses don't work out. If Matt Canada gets fired, I won't feel bad about that because he deserves it, but that's what I'm here there. But McDermott to me just isn't the type of guy that I would think for Buffalo works anymore, because it's like you've plateaued at the AFC title game. You haven't gotten past it. And that's what you need to do to show that you are good enough. Look at Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor was mired in terrible, seasons, but then one good season, and he's the Bengals coach for the next 5-6 years. It could be basically. So
yeah,
I think McDermott's I give him a high 3. I don't give him a 4. I give him a high 3, a little lower, but it's rising. If they do not beat the Jets this week, they are going to start calling for him to be fired after this season.
And even if they do end up making the playoffs, they got to go on some kind of run, because you mentioned it. The two teams the last 2 seasons to knock them out of the playoffs. Well, one of them we know is not going to be there, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. We know the Bengals aren't going to be there. Now it's just the Chiefs. And there's other teams that are trying to rise up here. You got to be better than them.
And it's like this was the perfect year because the Chiefs haven't been that good.
Yeah.
They've been good, don't get me wrong, but they haven't been the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
This is the perfect year for the Buffalo Bills to take that mantle. And to put it bluntly, they've been passed by Baltimore, man. The Ravens have shot right past them.
Yeah. And before the 49ers game, the Jaguars were looking pretty entertaining too, to say the very least.
Were. Yeah, they were, absolutely. So I don't know, man. It's rough in Buffalo, but I think he will last one more year, but unless they have a crater, if they fall off the map dramatically, if they lose the AFC East by like 2 or 3 games to Miami, then I think you're going to start to see it really get hot in the offseason for him.
Yeah. All right, there's that. So that ends the AFC portion of our head coach hot seat-o-meter. But let's move on to the NFC here, and quite a number of names. Let's run through these first 2. We're kind of low-key doing this by division because a lot of divisions here have strong representation in the hot seat.
Yep.
Let's begin in the NFC East here, Rick. First head coach, first of 2, Ron Rivera.
It's tricky because they're not going to be the worst team in this division, and they're still somewhat fighting for a playoff spot, but I think this is kind of where you start to understand the Eric Bieniemy effect, because I feel like he's gotten Sam Howell into a much better spot. I think Howell's first in the league in passing yards right now, or second or something like that. So yeah. I put Ron Rivera at a 4 because I think it's a new ownership, but at the same time, you understand you have Bieniemy there as an associate head coach who will probably become the head coach when Rivera gets fired. I don't think they have to go looking for anybody. I think Bieniemy has proven that he can lead a team and be really good at it. I think Ron Rivera's time is up, man. Unless they pull up a miracle run and get into the postseason this year, I just don't see it. He's a very good head coach. This just has not been his system. And the fact that they were so willing to trade Montez Sweat and Chase Young kind of shows you where their heads are at, I think, for the GM and the ownership group. So I go 4 for Ron Rivera.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. So this is interesting here. I feel like I'm giving this number a lot, but the reason I'm going to give him a 4 is because it doesn't even necessarily have to do with what the team performance is this season, right? Because I think the Commanders are kind of low-key how we expected it to run. I think this is more like you said. I think this is where we start to take external things into account. And I think the new ownership group, despite the fact that Ron Rivera, is been nowhere near a problem necessarily in Washington, I could see ownership wanting a new, flashy name to be there. And it doesn't need to be an outside hire. It could literally just be the guy that, as you said, is already in-house. And let's remember, he was signed to a 2-year deal to be the offensive coordinator. And you got to believe at some point the reason for that is because he needs to get a tryout as the head coach of this team.
Yeah.
The replacement is in-house. I think it's just a matter of when it's going to happen, not if. The reason that I'm not giving it a 5, because, and it's not really much of a respect thing, it's just because, Ron Rivera, still a respectable coach, still has a respectable record with this team. It could be worse in Washington. I think it could be worse. I
think that if the plan is that Ron Rivera knows this is his last go around, and if he made a deal with the Commanders' new ownership to say, listen, I want to coach out Bieniemy's offensive coordinator contract to then give him the role next year to then retire after that, I think that's better because again, they're 4-5, I believe, right? So they are not the worst team in this division, and they're showing competitive spirit under Ron Rivera. So I think the Commanders are at a good spot, and I think if you believe in that sort of stuff, you give Ron Rivera that opportunity, and then maybe do what Bruce Arians did and move him into the front office in some capacity, because I think that's ultimately where he should go, is a front office position afterwards.
Right, and I will say this for the Commanders. I mean, they're 3-3 on the road this season, so it's a lot of home games left, and it's a lot of potential for them to kind of get lucky here. And again, you have a game against the Giants coming up against Tommy DeVito. There's a good chance you're going to be close to 500 after this one. So
Yeah,
you have the opportunity there. So Ron Rivera, not long, but again, I think it's when will it happen, not if at some point.
right.
This will be finally. I can go down a little bit here. I'll give this a mid-tier 3 for this coach, Brian Daboll. Rick, here's my thing. I don't think they're going to hit the eject button after 2 years. I know it's a really rough second season, but at the end of the day, I said this would happen the whole time. Daniel Jones has been exposed. I think it's very clear what his talent level was. I think it's clear what the ceiling and cap of that talent is. But now I think what the team needs to do is need to find the next guy, and they'll have the potential to do that with their own first-round pick in this next draft. I'm putting him 3 because, again, sort of to a similar extent, I don't think Daboll's lost the locker room per se. I just think this season is lost because I think everybody knows that the quarterback situation has been shot. Daniel Jones' injury aside, Tyrod Taylor, who's a very respectable backup in this league, he's out too. Like, what can you do with Tommy DeVito, who it just feels like no matter who the head coach is, I don't even think, rest his soul, I don't think John Madden could get Tommy DeVito above 150 yards in the game. It is
No.
he's just not that great. Again,
No.
respect to the man, living the American dream, Tommy DeVito, I salute you. But it's just rough. So I'm giving this a 3 because there's no way, especially with the GM being his guy from Buffalo too. No, his job is pretty safe. I wanted to give this a 2, but because the Giants as a whole are so bad, I had to bump it up to a 3.
So I'm gonna surprise you and go with a 1.
Oh, okay.
So here's my thing. The last 3 Giants head coaches have only gotten 2 seasons. McAdoo, Shermer, and Judge. At some point, you have to break the spell, and I think Daboll's the right guy. I think this year he's just been overmatched, and I think the product of that is they made the wrong call with giving Daniel Jones the big contract. They should have tagged him instead of Barkley. But B, the Giants overplayed their win total from last year. They were not supposed to be 9-7-1. They were not supposed to go to the playoffs. They were not supposed to win a game in the playoffs. And what did that get them? Because they finished 3rd in the division. It got them really difficult games on their schedule this year. And so I think this year is what would have been the norm last year with Daboll. I think because they were so surprising last year, it threw people for a loop. But this season, how they're performing is what last year should have looked like for the New York Giants. So I've read somewhere that they're safe. Daboll and Shane are safe. I think that they are a good coach and GM tandem, but they've, as you said, they've got exposed this year, and they realized that it's not going to be as easy to run the same stuff over and over again as they did last year when they got lucky. They got lucky last year. They had 9 wins last year, was a godsend. Daboll was coach of the year at 9-7-1. That doesn't happen very often. So I think because of the pattern of the past, and because some of these players are moving in the right direction, I think it's a 1. I think he's the safest guy on this list.
No, I agree. I will bounce it. I will bump it down because I think I definitely did this at least once last season. I'll bump it back down. I'll put it down to a 2.
You did, but ultimately we were wrong because I made you bump down Lovie Smith, and we saw how that worked out.
Yeah. So there's that. But I think in Daboll we could trust this. I'll bump it down to a 2. Again, probably my only thing that just keeps me is the fact that them being bad this season, not because Joe Shane is going to turncoat the guy, but I more so think like it's not the record that's bothering me. It's certain individual performances where it's like I think it's on the coaching staff to try to help these guys if they can. Evan Neal, I'm talking to you. I might not be I'm definitely nowhere near a professional athlete, but I think I have every right to say, dude, you're a turnstile out there. And I know I've lived in New York 20 years of my life. I know what a turnstile is.
Well, look, I think that's the big key too, is that when they let go of John Feliciano from their line, they brought in J.C. Hassenauer at the offseason to kind of be that linchpin in the center. And then he went on IR at the very last week of training camp because of torn triceps. That is really what doomed them, because you put in John Michael Schmitz, who's a brand new center, and
realistically should probably be playing guard next to a veteran center.
I agree, or at least be a backup center, learning the ropes from a Hassenauer or Feliciano. But you thrust a rookie in there to be the main guy who's giving Daniel Jones the ball and trying to lead the blocking, it's not going to work out. But you're right. They got Turnstile on that side and Evan Neal. He's terrible.
Yeah. All right. From the NFC East, Rick, let's go to the North. It's almost like the division previews again. Let's go to the NFC North. Matt LaFleur. Oh my God, 2 years in a row that you're on this list, buddy.
It has to be a 5 now, right? It has to be because I get that Aaron Rodgers kind of helped you out in the sense, but now you're just exposed because Jordan Love's not the answer in Green Bay. Like we said, he wasn't going to be the answer, and they don't look inspired at all. I mean, look, they traded away, I think, their best defensive player in Rasul Douglas this year. So their young wide receiver core is good, but they're not breaking down the walls of being the best wide receiver core in their division even. It has to be a 5. The experiment's over. Get somebody new in here in Green Bay. Do something better because it's just done for them, I think.
I definitely don't blame you for making this a 5, Rick. And part of me wants to make it a 5, but here's the lone reason I'm giving it 4, because I don't trust Brian Gutekunst to ever make the right decision at the right time. I, for whatever reason, think that he's going to actually retain LaFleur for at least one more season. Because, and here's another thing, Rick. I think the Packers are an organization similar to the Steelers. I think they want to avoid having the look of firing someone as long and as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that old school way, it hurts you sometimes, because what's one thing about the Packers that we've always said, man, is that during the season, they're never willing to make a big deal. When they had Aaron Rodgers, they were never willing to try to make that trade in season to put them over the hump. That's one of my critiques with the Los Angeles Chargers, is that if you look at every single big transaction Tom Telesco's ever made, it's always in the offseason. It's never in the season. And I just don't think Brian Gutekunst has it in him to let go of his guy now. This is me lacking a trust more so in a general manager. I'm with you. I think it should 100% be a 5. And I realistically have that in mind, but I'm only going to say a 4 because I think there's a certain instinct in him to think, well, one of two things is going to happen here. Either Jordan Love is going to look decent at the end of this year, or they're going to find a way to just get a new QB in there, and that he's going to give LaFleur 1 year with that QB to see if he can look decent again.
The only thing that I'll say to kind of counteract with your point, because it's a good point, is that the Packers are owned by a lot of people.
Sure.
So if those people that have their shares write a letter to Gutekunst saying, fire him or we will sell our shares to Stan Kroenke or Vince McMahon, then, he'll be like, well, all right, LaFleur, you're gone. Something like
that. Fair. I just think ultimately, if the check clears, I think Gutekunst is fine. I think he's cool with it.
I suppose that's fair. Yeah.
So there's that. But realistically, probably should be 5. But let me give you a head coach that is almost certainly 5, Rick. Matty Eberflus of your beloved Chicago Bears, who were very close. I mean, will Rick get a new team for 2024? Who knows? But no, let's focus on Matty Eberflus. It's a 5. Look, here's the thing. Defensive first coaches, because we always separate these guys into offense and defensive first, even though I think that's kind of a very oversimplification of it, but just stick with me here. Defensive first coaches can work. They just need to either A, know who the hell to hire on offense, or B, help coach the discipline into the offensive skill position players. And if it hasn't been DJ Moore this season, God, that Bears offense is useless. They're bad. They're really bad. And it's just nothing left, I think, in Chicago. All that's left is to see what value Justin Fields can give you for the rest of the season for you to trade him. And that's more of a Ryan Poles thing. And maybe we need to revisit him. We need to have a general manager hot seat, I feel like, maybe in a future episode.
I like that, yes.
We'll put that into work for the GM hot seat-o-meter. Totally same imaging as this one, aka none whatsoever. But ladies and gentlemen, we're small budget for now.
Right.
But no, Matty Eberflus to me is a 5. If you're going to get a new QB like we're expecting in this offseason, he needs a new head coach.
Or if you're going to have the opportunity to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and pair him with DJ Moore, then why not go up the midway and try and lure Jim Harbaugh away from University of Michigan and make him the head coach of your Bears? So if those of us who are eagle-eyed know that last year I gave Cliff Kingsbury a 15 on the power on the rankings, that's what I'm giving Eberflus. This is the most likely to be fired of all the head coaches, I think, because he looks lost. He just does not look like the right guy for this job. He is a deer in a series of headlights that are just careening down the midway at him. And he he's not good. And I think if Justin Fields does better in the second half of this season, that makes it even worse because they didn't draft him.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to use him properly. And all the love in the world of Tyson Bagent, but all you did was just expose your head coach even further. So, Eberflus to 15. Get him the hell out of my midway. I'm done.
Yeah, not great to say the very least in Chicago, and that you need something new there. It's going to be a new look Chicago Bears team next season, and the head coach has got to be one of the things that they ultimately switch out there.
Yep.
All right, let's keep moving on this list, and yes, the rest of the NFC North is safe because we spoke about this last week. MCDC probably coach of the year, and Kevin O'Connell big second half of the season for himself. I don't think he would have been fired at the end of this year, even if they had continued to be bad, but it's looking really good for him to say the very least. All right, Rick. Let's go to the NFC South. Keep track on this one, kids. I think you'll see a pattern with the NFC South here. First coach I'm going to bring up, Dennis Allen. Look, I went first on Eberflus, so you go first on Dennis Allen here, Rick.
So I know you don't like him, and you have your reasons to it. I understand that. He is the most mid of mid coaches, even though that's praising him in your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he's the 3, and I'll tell you why. This division is so up for grabs between New Orleans, Atlanta, and Tampa Bay that if Dennis Allen does somehow get them to a 9-8 record and they win the division, something worked. I think Derek Carr down there has worked in some ways, but there are holes they need to figure out on both sides of the ball. And I don't know if he's the right guy for it, but again, I think he's the best coach they can get right now. And so I put him at the middle of the road because, the inkling is that you definitely want him to be fired. But if they somehow make it out of this god-awful division with the title and they host a playoff game, you have to kind of give him a little bit more leeway there. So I give him a 3. I think, I forget what the name is of their offensive coordinator who's been there for
Pete Carmichael.
Pete Carmichael's been there for like 95 years. He should go.
He's the Matt Canada of the NFC.
Yeah, he's got to go. He's been one job for 30 plus years. It's ridiculous. Right. But yeah, Dennis Allen for me is a 3.
My second 5 of this ranking.
Of course it is.
And it won't be the last. No, get Dennis Allen out of there, man. This is a guy who was 4-20 when he actually no 8. Carry the 2 divided by 3. 8-28 when he was the Raiders head coach many years ago. He was 7-10 last season. And it's mid this season. Like you said, I think it's disrespectful to the other mid-tier coaches in this league to say that this guy is mid. He stinks. Look, man, why is it that when we talk about the hiring of coordinators, the head coach never gets brought into it? I know the GM probably finalizes it along with the owner, but we do know that head coaches can bring their own staff in, right? We know that Sean Payton literally brought in his entire own crew to Denver.
We know that, but nobody else seems to know that.
Yeah, I feel like some people forget. Like, no, you're the one that was so gung-ho with Pete Carmichael. Like, no, get fired. get fired. Like, whether it's the offense or the defense, and the defense at times, which you're supposed to be a defense. Again, if you're bad at the thing you were apparently supposed to help make better about a team, and you're not good at it, why do you still have a job? Why? Rick, if you were the greatest pizza maker in Long Island, and that everyone was happy with your pizza, right? But for 3 straight months, the pizza you're making, no one was satisfied with it. Would you still be in the pizza making business? Or would it finally be time to get you out of there?
Well, I mean, I believe that it would be time for me to get out of there. Maybe try and go, make more hamburgers or hot dogs like Evan Neal wants me to do. But, I suppose you're right. Like I said, the only reason why I think that Dennis Allen has a chance is because this division is awful. And so if you can be the best of the worst, that at least affords you one more year, because if we have so many guys on our list, and if all of them get fired, there's not going to be enough head coaches to go around. So I think you have to take the best of a bad situation and keep them for one more year.
I just think it would be fun.
It'd be great.
These guys get fired.
It'd be great.
It'd just be fun. I hate saying that because I don't like people losing their jobs.
I cannot wait until we say NFL head coach Jim Bob Cooter. That'd be great.
Oh, Lord. I mean, hey, you never know. You never know. Hey, give Raheem Morris a goddamn shot. You want a defensive first guy? Give Raheem Morris another shot. He
was in Tampa. He won a division in Tampa. Give him another chance.
Give him another chance. Maybe in the NFC South. All right. Speaking of the NFC South, we have more. Arthur Smith.
It's a shame. It's a shame Justin's not here.
Right?
It's a shame Justin's not here.
He's missing a good one.
This would be Justin's 15 out of 5, if anybody.
Get better, Justin. Once again,
Yeah, get better, of course.
let me start this.
Go for it.
Let me go like Dave Meltzer on all AEW matches that don't deserve it. Although this one actually deserves the 5 rating. 5 out of 5 here. 5-star and 5-star. Please get fired and never come back.
What is your knock on AEW, man? Jeez,
It's just so easy to throw stones at them.
That's fair.
They've built their own glass house, and glass might be calling it nice. Anyways, ultimately, look, he doesn't know how to use Bijan Robinson consistently. I think the biggest play this season from a tight end was by Jonnu Smith and not Kyle Pitts, who they only drafted 4th overall.
Right.
And Drake London is a top 10 wide receiver. He had this weird fixation of keeping Desmond Ridder as long as possible in there. And he gives off the Aaron Rodgers thing, which I know you don't like Aaron Rodgers for, of thinking he's the smartest guy in the room. The problem is at least Aaron Rodgers has 4 MVPs, a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP to back up the idea that he could, in theory, know what he's talking about in terms of football. Arthur Smith is not the smartest guy in the room in any way, shape, or form. The one good thing is that he finally shaved off the mustache. I didn't like the look of his mustache either, so that was the one positive. So maybe that saved his job, but no. He's a 5. Get fired for not knowing how to use any of these guys. Atlanta, again, winning the NFC South is not a prize here. It's not. It's like coming first place in a competition down in hell. Okay, you're being the worst of the best. Is that really what you want to be known for? Come up here to purgatory with me. Let's watch Chargers games for the rest of eternity, and let's have some Mountain Dew while we're doing it.
That's purgatory for you, watching Chargers games.
I mean, I feel like the Chargers fans would say that's been purgatory for them.
I suppose that's fair. Yeah.
But no, Arthur Smith, get fired. This is a guy. Your pick is Matt Eberflus. I think if they don't win the division, I mean, I would do it even if they win the division. But he actually no. This is more my Brendan Staley for you, where I don't care what happens with this team. He needs to be fired. How do you not? It's one thing if he doesn't know how to use one of these guys.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to use any of them.
Yeah. The gross negligence of Arthur Smith, because you know what? He was an offensive guru in Tennessee, and he was so set on bringing his offense into Atlanta and putting the guys there into his offense that's not what they run. So I'm with you. I think it's a 5. And I had Atlanta winning this division, and they still could win the division, but he's not the right guy for this anymore. I think Atlanta is winning these games in spite of his coaching, and they're losing because of his coaching, if you will. We're going to see Desmond Ridder back, I think, this week or whenever they play again, because Heineke, I think, is hurt. So it's going to be Ridder again. Right. So, ain't going to be pretty. But yeah, it's when you don't know how to use Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, hell, even Tyler Algier, who, by the way, ran for over 1,000 yards last year for your paltry offense.
Yeah,
you don't know how to use those guys. You're not worthy. So yeah, I think he's a 5.
And also coming from Tennessee, where he had he got this job because he looked great with Derrick Henry, and now you have Bijan and Algier. How?
Because Derrick Henry runs in a certain style, and that's the style that Arthur Smith knows works, and he wants to bring that over. But Bijan and Algier do not run in that style. By the way, where's Cordero Patterson gone? Because he was another guy that was such a big key to this offense last year and really showed that he could be a two-position player, running back and wide receiver. Where's he gone?
Yeah. Let's add him into there. It's top 10 pick wide receiver, top 5 pick tight end, top 10 pick running back. And for all intents and purposes, a really great Swiss Army knife, because let's not forget his return ability as well early in his career. That's honestly what, if Cordell Patterson didn't have his return ability, he would have been out of the league probably after his rookie deal.
Absolutely.
You have this many, and let's be real here. An offensive line with Chris Lindstrom and Jake Matthews, we said in the preseason, this was probably maybe the best offensive line on paper in this division.
Yeah.
You're wasting the entirety of that offense.
They have no idea what to do.
For nothing. So
nothing.
5. Get him out of there.
Get out. Right. Get fired.
We can only. All right, Rick, Todd Bowles.
Get fired. I have never really been a fan of Todd Bowles, and I think that it's just Tampa's weird. They have good pieces, but at the same time, they're missing something. Their offense with Rashad White and Mike Evans, Cade Otton, Chris Godwin, they're a good offense, but their quarterback play, Baker hasn't been good. But how much of that is on Todd Bowles and how much of that is on Baker being a bust at a number 1 overall pick? And their defense hasn't really done anything that makes you say, "Oh, they're a good defense." They're there. You
Yeah.
know, they're the equivalent of a tree in the middle of a road. It's there. You know,
It's there.
so I want to give him a 5, but I think that would be too harsh. I give him a high 4, and I'll say that he'll probably be safe, but I won't be surprised if he goes as well this year.
Right. I think I might surprise you a little bit with Todd Bowles. I'm giving him a 3.
Mm.
And spoiler, he's probably close to the lowest of the NFC South coaches. Here's my thing. I think with the way that the Buccaneers have surprised people this season, and not only because we had expected them to probably be like what close to the, I think I at least expected the Buccaneers to be competing with the Cardinals for top 3 picks in the draft and to sell off at the trade deadline. They didn't do either. They're a little bit better than advertised. Now there's a whole two months or so to play. If they fall off a cliff, well, Todd Bowles' NFL head coaching career will also go off that cliff.
Yes.
But at the time, I think, and we were talking about this earlier in the season with the start that they had, I think, A, we always thought it was unsustainable at some point. But B, I felt like it was all about confidence. And despite the fact that they've obviously lost some games here, and it is not easy going into that San Francisco game now, I think Todd Bowles has been a steady hand there for a team that is still trying to recover from the Brady retirement spiel, the retirement, then unretirement, then retirement again, and having to deal with the cap hit issues that have come with you trying to keep him there and now him no longer being there. And I think Baker has done a solid enough job to rehabilitate himself. I think, and this is very rare for me to do, I think both Baker and Bowles are coming back to Tampa next season.
Wow.
Because I don't think they're going to, and again, we still have 2 months, but I don't know if they're going to be bad enough to necessarily get one of these young QBs that here's the thing. They're not going to be bad enough to get one of the for sure QBs in this draft. So then you need to ask yourself, are you going to take a risk with one of the mid-tier QBs and think you can make him into something? And 1 or 2 of these mid-tier QBs is kind of older than some of the others coming into this class. Bo Nix for anybody.
Yep.
Spencer Rattler for anybody. Some of these guys are going to be a little bit older than the average of others. That is it really worth it now? Or maybe, I mean, I don't know. I think, again, he might be projected higher than what they might end up going. Or it depends how his season ends. But maybe even Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Are you going to take a risk on him?
Yeah.
Or are you going to roll the dice and see what the next year or 2 of draft QBs comes down the line being, which will also include, for all intents and purposes, Arch Manning, who, good Lord, a third of this league is going to end up tanking for. That's going to be their Connor Bedard, basically. That's going to be their Wemby. So I think for you just run it back in 2024 because worst case scenario, right? I mean, it's a fine enough head coach that could just eat the brunt of it for a year before you just let him go.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that he just presents such a stagnant, boring personality that you're years removed from a Super Bowl win, man.
To be fair, he wasn't the head coach though. He was the DC,
but he was still a part of that team. So but it's just the Glazers are another ownership group that's just very odd with some of the decisions they make too. So I understand. I do understand your point there, and I agree. I also believe that if you're the Buccaneers, maybe go for a young quarterback who's not doing anything in Philadelphia, like a Tanner McKee, and maybe try and lead him and see what he can do. That'd be nice. Thanks, but yeah, I see your point for a 3. I don't dislike it. I think it's a good suggestion there on your part.
We have neglected Tanner McKee this season.
Big time.
We will bring him back into the Sports Angels of Chaos universe.
Yes.
To say, all right, Frank Reich, Rick. This is an interesting one because I think Frank Reich has been given a quarterback that he didn't want.
Yeah.
And I think he's trying to work with Bryce Young. I don't think his scheme fits with Bryce Young.
It doesn't. But that's the problem is that the Panthers have made it known with taking him at number 1 that he's their quarterback of the future for however long the future is. But this is not – you're right. I think if Frank Reich had C.J. Stroud, the Panthers would be a much better team. I think but it's so hard to judge because also the Panthers didn't do many favors. Their wide receiver core was just a bunch of number 2s.
I think even less than that. See, here's the thing. This is why I say in regards to the quarterback decision, we know this isn't the quarterback that fit his scheme. This was a Dave Tepper call through and through. He wanted Bryce Young to be the guy. The only disagreement I have with C.J. Stroud, it's not that I think C.J. Stroud would have fit Frank Reich better. But I think we saw a lot of things on this Panthers team take a step back. This offensive line that was one of the best units over the last half of the second half of last season has completely regressed to even average play would be fine at this point. They're below average at points. Wide receivers, if it's not Adam Thielen, who's becoming I think the 8th or 9th wonder of the world, being pretty good when Minnesota thought he was done, basically. He's been great for them. Aside from that, you have a complete underperformance of Laviska Shenault and Terrence Marshall Jr. and the guys on the skill position group, which all coming into their careers were supposed to be guys that had pretty good talent. And it's been nothing. The defense, it's same old story where there's nice, young, talented pieces, but it's just struggles of consistency and even at points injury to an extent where people are now questioning, should the Panthers have taken the Rams' alleged trade offer last year of Brian Burns for 2 first-round picks, and should they have just done that? Because you'd be sitting pretty right now if you're the Carolina Panthers, because you traded your first-round pick, but you would have that Rams first-round pick right now.
Right. Don't forget also that Chuba Hubbard's been really good for them in the backfield as well, which I'm going to do something that I've never done on the podcast before, and I'm going to give this an incomplete.
Okay.
Because there are so many mitigating factors that it's not Frank Reich's fault, but he also hasn't made the best of the guys that he has.
Right.
I think you're right. His scheme is such that these guys just aren't working, but it's also the guys that were brought in weren't the guys that he, I think, wanted. And so I think you have to grade this year as a wash. So I'm going to say incomplete because I think next year is the real year where we can kind of test everything out and see what it is in a way. So it may be me bypassing and bailing on this, but I really can't judge Frank Reich for any of this. I can't judge him fairly or unfairly for any of this. So I'm going to grade this an incomplete.
All right. I'll give it a 3 just because that's my equivalent to an incomplete, basically, where I think there are things out of his control, like the quarterback situation, that I think he would have much rather had. And then I think there are also things that he could potentially do. Like, I think Frank Reich, in terms of the skill position players, they should just be better. I think that's a scheming thing in his regard. The offensive line falling apart, I can't necessarily put that on him. Like, this part of the thing where I think us as the greater NFL society, and I don't think it's just like you, me, and Justin. I think this is most even analysts that are paid on national television. I don't think we truly understand what makes offensive linemen great all the time. And I don't think we simply understand how they stay good for as long as they do. Not everyone is a Trent Williams. Not everyone can somehow be Jason Peters, who just got signed to the main roster for the Seattle Seahawks at the age of 42. I don't know. But not everyone can be at a pretty good level like that. And I think we just struggle at understanding how are these people able to get at that level. And I think from an offensive line perspective, I can't necessarily blame Frank Reich because I don't know how much of a hand he has in the blocking scheme. I don't know if that's necessarily on him or his coaches. But again, if this is his guy on the offensive line, there's some culpability. So I'm going to be fair and I'll give it a 3. I think this season, it's just so much bad happening. I think it's towering on everyone. I think next year, like you said, is the year that we're going to figure out whose fault is it that things are just completely collapsing in Carolina. And as the alliteration happens there, let's go to the last head coach on the list. Let me actually just double check. I always want to be on our P's and Q's and, cross our T's and dot our I's, or dot our T's and cross our I's if you're feeling froggy. Our last head coach on the list, Rick, Jonathan Gannon of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, if you had asked me in the preseason, I'd have given this would be my 15. Because good Lord, this dude could not motivate me to eat a ham and cheese sandwich. And I've eaten a lot of those in my time up in Connecticut, to say the very least. As Rick and Justin definitely know, I can't cook for anything. And also, it's easy to make. That being said, I think what gives me slight pause is what are the Cardinals going to do? Because if the Arizona Cardinals, it is not even necessarily how they're going to end the season, right? If they're not going to move on from Kyler, do you just keep the guy? Because I think if you're moving on from Kyler, this is where we need to, this is the tricky part, like I mentioned earlier, and will be in the description of the YouTube video of this, is like figuring out what from an organizational perspective the team is doing. If you're not going to move on from Kyler, or if you were going to move on from Kyler, if you were going to get a new young QB in there, this is a repeat of the previous situation with Steve Wilkes going into Cliff Kingsbury. If you're going to replace the QB that was there with a new one with a top whatever pick, and you go from there. It's aces. But if Kyler is able to play his way and stay in San Francisco, almost at San Francisco, Jesus, although I think, what, the 49ers trade for Kyler Murray? No. If he's able to play his way and stay in Arizona, what happens for his future and what happens for Jonathan Gannon's future as he finally gets the guy that he probably should have had in a perfect world at the start of the season?
So you're right. Jonathan Gannon should not be a motivational speaker in any capacity anywhere in the world. Um, that being said, there's such a microscope now on Arizona because of how last year ended and all the stuff with Steve Keim. And I don't know if you saw that ESPN report about the Bidwills, about Michael Bidwill come out, about how he's at such a toxic ownership group.
Right.
What I will say is this: we expected the Cardinals to be bad, but we didn't expect them to be as good as they've been bad because they've been playing really well. They haven't been able to match the firepower on some of the offenses, but there have been games where they've been competitive. So I give Jonathan Gannon a low 2 on this list because I think that he's a good enough coach to survive the first year, and now that he has Kyler Murray back, listen, if they can pull off a couple wins here and they get to 5 or to 6, it's a lot more than people thought they were going to have going into the season, right? So, it might be a case where you do take a look and say, oh, maybe we should keep Kyler Murray and maybe we should keep these guys. It's probably for the best of that. So I think that while he hasn't galvanized them off the field, I think on the field, he's kind of displayed that leadership and that celebratory nature that you want to see in a young head coach. I think he was the wrong coordinator to take from the Eagles, but Shane Steichen's doing really well in Indianapolis. But I think that Gannon's doing okay enough for me to go for a low 2. I think he's safe for this year, and I think we'll see what happens next year. But it's also dependent upon, like you said, what the Cardinals do with Kyler Murray and beyond from there.
Yeah, and again, this is a situation where it's a new general manager. It's Monty Austinfort who is the general manager with his guy, and he was hired to be the Cardinals' new general manager January 16th, 2023. As the new general manager, is it necessarily a good look for you to fire your first head coach after just one season?
No, it's not. And again, I think the only way that would happen is if it comes up from higher up. But let's see. I don't. Given what's happening right now with the NFL and with the Bidwill family, and if you have the time, go read that report on ESPN about it. I think that they have to kind of keep things as consistent as possible to not do that. So you agree? Good. Thank you.
So as Rick gets the seal, or in this case, growls of approval. Man, what a turnaround this is for me. I don't think I've had a quick head coach take turnaround like this in a while for me. Now, that being said, I still think it ultimately depends. If I could look into a crystal ball right now, and if I could say the Arizona Cardinals are planning to move on from Kyler Murray, I could see them going with a new head coach after this season. But I think because it's also up in the air, I'm going to slightly lean with you. I'm in the 2 or 3 category on this one, Rick. Because again, Jonathan Gannon, I also think this is the funny part. And this is where I need to make an exception with my whole you're brought in to do something specific deal, and you're bad at it. What's the case? Yes, he was the defensive coordinator on the Eagles last season. And I know a lot of Eagles fans were actually happy when he was taken away from the team to be someone else's head coach. What does he have on defense? And I know people are going to say, well, the Eagles are a pretty talented defense. To be fair, yes. But in his head coaching stint, this is different now. Like, he was given a bare bones roster with the starting QB out for however many games at the start of the season. I'm being very nice to him, a lot nicer than I was earlier in the season.
Yeah.
Check the previous podcast. I'm going to be nice. I'm actually just going to say a 3 because I think Jonathan Gannon, I think he deserves, I can't believe I'm saying this now. I think he actually probably does deserve a second year here in Arizona for a team to work his way. Now, again, I'm saying this without knowing the future. So that's all we could go on. I think there's still a possibility that a new quarterback could mean a new head coach.
What I will say, too, is I think the greatest achievement that Jonathan Gannon has this season is that about 15% of fantasy teams across the ESPN league have Rondale Moore on their fantasy team.
Yep.
That means that he's doing something. Is it correct? I don't know, but it's something. And to your point, too, that defense is so bare bones. Yes, Budda Baker was going to leave before training camp even started, and he's still there. Zaven Collins wasn't traded at the deadline. He's still there. So there are pieces to build around, but it's like 1 or 2 instead of 5 or 6. So it's very, very, very cupboard's very bare in Arizona.
Yeah, and again, that's not on him at all. That's, we have to say the previous regime because this isn't even on Monty either. Like he literally just got there earlier this year.
Right.
He hasn't even been GM for a full calendar year. So, wow, I can't. What a turnaround, Rick. And here I thought Jonathan Gannon was going to be the last 5 on this list, but no,
not for me.
not for me
no.
either. Not for me.
Good.
That's reserved for the NFC South.
Because you know why? You know why I'm not guaranteeing 5? Because I took the bus here. That's why.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, I go even a step further, Rick. I got fired in the gut. I walk to work every day. I go.
There you go. Look at that.
There we go. Maybe Rick, are we Jonathan Gannon guys after all?
No, I think we're just. I think if the list was shorter and didn't include some of the guys we know should get fired, he'd probably be higher. But in the grand scheme of things, like Jonathan Gannon versus Brandon Staley, Staley's got to go first.
Oh, of course.
So that's what I think.
Oh, look at that, ladies and gentlemen. All right. And that completes the 2023 edition of the NFL Head Coach Hot Seat-O-Meter. What a time. What a time, to say the very least. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, the episode's almost over, but we're not getting the usual end to the episode like normal for multiple reasons. A, Justin's not here, and it just don't hit the same without our guy, Justin, first. And second, well, the pod daughter, I think, is sleeping at the moment, so Rick can't go into full rant mode.
Yeah, I can't. That's true. And trust me, I don't think she's used to ranting of this nature just yet. So we're going to skip that for the moment. However,
we do have
a mind-blowing fact for you to close out the show. And it ties into a discussion that we had a little earlier on the day today about Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, but also about Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, because the Browns are 6-3. And at this point, you're thinking they're a trendy pick to win their division. Obviously, with Watson going down, that's not the case. But I don't know if you recall, Jerg, during this year's NFC North preview, I mentioned the drought for the Detroit Lions and how even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won that division before more recently than the Lions have. Well, this is another one.
Oh, no.
The Cleveland Browns' last division win, not last playoff berth, last division win in the NFL. They weren't even the Cleveland Browns of this generation. They were Cleveland Browns of the old generation. It was 1989 that they last won the AFC Central. It was good times back then. So if you know where I'm going with this, then you know where I'm going with this. 2 years later, and then 4 years later, another team won the AFC Central, and that team no longer plays in the NFL. That would be the Houston Oilers. So the Houston Oilers, the defunct Houston Oilers, have won a division in the NFL more recently than the current Cleveland Browns have. Sad, isn't it?
That's bad.
And if Deshaun wasn't hurt, this might have been a good chance for it because, again, they've got to play the Ravens, I think, another time. So there might have been a chance for them to do it. But you're not going to tell me that DTR is going to lead them to a division crown, or God forbid they get Joe Flacco. It's not going to work. Although think of the justice that would be that Joe Flacco comes onto the Browns and leads them to a division win over his former team that he won a Super Bowl with.
That would be crazy.
Think of that. That'd be great.
What you know what? The Hall of Fame case may actually build off of that.
Oh, God. Hall of Fame Flacco? Never thought I'd hear those words.
And we may never hear them ever again because they just don't exist, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of no longer existing, episode 83 is said and done, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. A little bit of a different, a little bit of a subdued episode, even with all the firing. Justin, get better. We miss you, bud. Hopefully he'll be back and ready for the special Thanksgiving episode that is going to be occurring within the next couple of days, because Thanksgiving, time for the family, time for food, time with friends. More importantly, we have to record that before all the NFL games get going. It's going to be
three games on Thanksgiving night and one on Black Friday.
It's wild to say the very least. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will get an early edition of the next episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, which will include yet another episode of the Pick Challenge, the return of the Rant Podium, maybe a Thanksgiving themed Rant Podium for all we know, and fun games back with our good old buddy, pal, friend of ours, Justin, the games master himself. So, thank you all once again for joining us on a fantastic edition of this podcast. We'll see you all in just under a week's time for the Thanksgiving edition of the show. Let's have some good football this week. Let's have some good food next week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.